Hey everyone, welcome to Mr. Geopolitics. So I have an update for you. This is fresh off the press. And things are getting exciting in Ukraine. Basically, at the near the Izium front, north of Izium, there is a town known as Balakliya. And for some time now, for about a month, the Ukrainians have been building up forces, slowly sending forces to the east of the Izium front. And today they attacked in the direction of Balakliya from Andriivka. So from Andriivka to Balakliya. And earlier on, a few hours ago, there was somewhat a situation where there was some initial confusion, something like the fog of war. Initially, it was thought that the Ukrainians had made it into Balakliya and that they had taken most of the town. But it turns out that they actually, what they ended up doing was they took Verbivka, which is kind of like the outskirts, like the suburbs of Balakliya. Balakliya, I believe, had a pre-war population of 20 to 30,000 people, like 27,000 or something. I don't know what the population is now, maybe half, maybe 3/4. But anyways, the Ukrainians established themselves at Verbivka, and there was word about some fighting at a river crossing, a bridge, and that the Russians were holding firm at the river crossing. And initially it was thought that it was right here at the end of Balakliya, right? So in that case, the Ukrainians would have, in that case, they would have taken most of the town, right? But it turns out that the Russians have actually held firm. Either that or they repelled the Ukrainians. And what the Ukrainians ended up doing is they went north, but they didn't take the main road, because if they came from Andriivka, you see the P78 highway or road in the light orange. But they didn't take this road, apparently, because if they took this road, they would have had to go right through the center of Balakliya. So apparently they didn't, and instead they just went off-road and they went north. So there's one group headed north. Just one second. There's one group that came like this and is headed north. And I believe another group has actually come from Ivanivka, this town right here, Ivanivka. And what they did is they went southeast down the M103, and they are now at Volokiviyar. So essentially, we're still not 100% sure about this. It's going to take some time, but essentially what the Ukrainians might have done is they might have cut off all these settlements right here, like Kalinivka and Stepak. But all these settlements are actually really what you would refer to as hamlets, or they're more like little in-between road stops with maybe a few dozen houses at the most, like smaller than a village, or you could call it a village, but some people call them hamlets. But anyways, if the Ukrainians can successfully consolidate these gains, the bad news for them is that they didn't take Balakliya, what was initially reported. But if they're able to consolidate this, that's actually pretty good, because that would give them fire control over the M103. And this is a problem for Russia, because right now, essentially, the Ukrainians, they're in the south, right? But the issue is there's a lot of forests here, right? So that's a natural barrier. There's rivers and forests here that they would have to cross. And I believe there's a bridge right here, which the Russians could blow at any time. But so that's a defensive barrier, but they could come from the south, right? And they could also come from the west, which they have come from. So what I'm hearing is that essentially at this point, Balakliya is it's not encircled, but it's under fire control. Like, the Ukrainians can any road that leads to it, the Ukrainians can use artillery on it. So this might be their plan, to just soften up all of these positions and prevent reinforcements from getting to Balakliya, and then they might try storming it. But what I've also heard is that a bridge has been blown, a bridge that that was being fought over earlier. So if it's not the bridge at the east end of Balakliya, then it must be it might be I'm trying to figure it out. It might be this area right here. So I'm going to get rid of these lines so you can see it better. I'm going to get rid of these lines and then zoom in. So it might be this right here. Because, you know, this map might not be precise. So I don't know. It might be right here. It might be this bridge, because there's a bridge over this river. So that might be the bridge that's blown. So that that would mean that the Ukrainians wouldn't have access to Balakliya, but then the Russians would have a hard time getting to Verbivka also, right? So I don't know. Maybe the Ukrainians did it on purpose because they just want to make things harder for the Russians, and maybe they just want to consolidate, you know, these gains over here, from basically here to here, like that, right? Maybe that's what they want to do. Something like that. Who knows? But this is a problem for the Russians, because if the Ukrainians can consolidate their positions and send massive reinforcements, they could go down the M103, and eventually that leads to Izium, and of course from Izium that leads to Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, and a lot of analysts have said for a long time that the Battle of the Donbass would come down to Kramatorsk. So the Izium bridgehead is vital for the Russians. So I'm sure the Russians are sending reinforcements. And from what I hear, they are indeed sending in reinforcements. Their planes are active in the area. Now, we're hearing that at Balakliya, that actually Su-25 has been shot down. And there's a video that's come out of the Ukrainians here, but it just shows them playing loud music, and it shows 3 pickup trucks, like 3 maybe 10-year-old, something like, I don't know, a decade-old pickup trucks. Which is not very smart on their end, because they're exposing themselves. But I don't know, if they're sending ragtag forces like that to the front, then I think the Russians will counterattack and push them back. But the Ukrainians might even choose like it remains to be seen if they can take Balakliya and consolidate their position, but they might even choose to blow this bridge, and they might be content with just keeping everything west of the river, and then making a big PR stunt out, making a big propaganda win out of it, basically saying we took 6, 7 settlements in one day, and we took this much land in one day, when really, I mean, these settlements are tiny, but still it's a good propaganda win if they're able to do it. And in that way they would have fire control over the M103. But I guarantee the Russians, from what I'm hearing, they're already sending reinforcements, and their air force and artillery are already picking off the Ukrainians. So we're gonna have to wait and see what happens. But I'm gonna show you another map, a map by Rybar. So this came out a few hours ago, right? You can see that one of the groups came from Andriivka, and they took Verbivka, and then pushed up north and took Yakovenkov, right? And we can see here Andriivka, Verbivka, and Yakovenkov. Initially, I thought they had used the P78 road, but again, they would have to go through the center of Balakliya, the center of town, to be able to use that road, which would be the most convenient. It runs along this river, the T2110 road or highway, but no, it seems like they, because if you zoom in, I don't see any roads that lead directly. See, there's no roads that lead directly north, so perhaps they went off road, I don't know. But anyways, there's one map by Rybar, and here's another map by Rybar. And in this one, you can see how they've taken all the territory, right? There's one group, and there's another group. And I don't know if the groups have been able to link up even. But the fire control for the Russians is the biggest problem, that they now have fire control over parts of this highway, and that they have access to this highway. But we're gonna have to wait and see what happens, and that's the biggest news coming out of Ukraine right now. Aside from that, what else? Okay, so this right here, if we go to the Seversk front, near Seversk, Ozern, the Russians said it's a PR stunt. It was a PR stunt, and we didn't hear about any clashes over this. We haven't heard about any artillery strikes. We haven't heard anything. So I would think that this was really a PR stunt, because as I've said in my previous videos, I mean, even if the Ukrainians went in here, the Russians could blow the bridges that lead to Ozern, and then there's nothing but forests and bodies of water here. So I mean, it's just a nightmare for any force to go through. And if you notice, the line that separates the Ukrainians and the Russians is the Seversky Donetsk River in this region. So in the Donbass, the Donetsk area of the Donbass, which the Russians want to take, the Seversky Donetsk River, especially in the north, it separates the two armies, right? The two forces. The Russians are in the north, Ukrainians in the south. But the Ukrainians crossed over to Ozern. The Russians say they crossed over, took some pictures, and left. It was a PR stunt, but not hearing anything else. That's what it seems to be. But the Russians also claim, and this map shows, that a lot of the areas near the front are not, are basically abandoned. They're like, there's no one really there, because the Russians basically don't want to be you don't want to be like too close to your enemy. You don't want to be too exposed so they can see you, spot you, use artillery on your positions. But the Russians basically want to be just far away enough so that they can not be spotted but still use artillery. So that kind of makes sense. And even this map, which is pro-Ukrainian, you see it's not colored in blue. It's just it's basically like a gray zone, like a no man's land. But I don't know. Even if pushing into these areas would be difficult because of the forests and all the rivers. I mean, you would get ambushed so badly, right? And then staying here, the Russians would just use their artillery on you. And some Russian sources are actually saying that the Ukrainian troops that came into Ozern, when they left, as they were leaving, the Russian artillery actually struck them. But we don't know that. All we know is that the Ukrainians are claiming this town, but we haven't heard anything about it. So I think it's just a PR stunt, or something. Something is wrong with that situation. Along the entire front, the Russians are basically they're rotating troops, sending fresh troops to the front at Soledar and Bakhmut. I believe there's Chechen troops now who are experts at taking cities and fighting in cities. So people are waiting to see what happens with that. But what else? Let's see. At Pisky, the Russians have basically consolidated their position. They basically control all of these areas leading up to this road. At this point, they're basically in control and trying to go forward now. So that's one thing. And Marinka, the Russians have taken 100% control of Marinka. So Marinka is under their control, and the group there wants to push forward from there. That's another thing. Let's see. Just give me a second here. So, over here, where this bulge sticks out, this is the Zaporizhia front. Over here, we know that the Russians have taken this town right here of Remivka. And they've also taken Novopil. Something like that. But then there are some pro-Russian analysts who are saying that the Russians have also taken all the settlements to the south, and these are like micro settlements. These settlements are basically just roads. I mean, they have names, but they're basically like, what we would consider a truck stop. Like, it's just a road, and there might be a few houses here, like a rural kind of area with a road leading through it. So so that would make sense. I mean, if they took Novopil, that actually makes sense that they would take these settlements as well, because they could come up from the south and then the north, and and then that would be a more secure position in a sense, because you don't want a bulge sticking out, right? The Ukrainians could attack from multiple positions, including the south, right? So this would be more solid like that. And then some are saying that the Russians have even taken this town, this village, this micro hamlet here of Neskuchne. And that would make sense if they had done that. Their ultimate goal here, basically, if you look at the big picture, would be to push north and eventually reach this road right here. And if they were able to reach this road and cut it off from the west, that would relieve that would basically, all these Ukrainian settlements here would be stranded, and the Russians would probably take them over sooner or later, and that would basically, relieve the city of Donetsk, which is constantly gets bombarded from time to time, and oftentimes civilians die as well. So that's one of the that's a goal that the Russians have had for a while, to clear the areas around Donetsk, so that to make it more difficult for the Ukrainians to keep bombing the city of Donetsk. And something else I have to mention. Where is it? Kodema. The settlement of Kodema. Yeah, right here. Basically, the Russians, and this map basically shows it, they've basically taken over all of Kodema now. So Kodema has been cleared. All of it has been cleared, according to the Russians. So, and obviously the Russians are looking to expand westwards from there and cut off Bakhmut from the south. Okay. So, heading west, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant has been shut down. I mentioned that previously. The Russians have decided to shut it down because the Ukrainians keep bombing it, and the Ukrainians tried twice to seize it by sending ships, attempting amphibious landings, but those failed miserably. Hundreds, probably 300 to 400 Ukrainian troops died in those attempted landings, but at the same time the Ukrainians keep shelling this nuclear power plant. The Russians decided, we're just going to shut it down for now. At the Kherson front, so Visokopilya a few days ago the Ukrainians took, right? And they took it, and now they're claiming that they took the hamlet of Novosnesk, I guess. Yeah, that's my best try. Novosnesk. So they're saying they took the hamlet of Novosnesk. Which is, zoom in there. It's a road with a few houses, right? Probably. But yeah, that's another claim, and this is the Kherson front, of course, and at the David Breed area, nothing really new. The Russians have blown up all the pontoon bridges leading into David Brid, into this area, to Suki Stavok. And the Ukrainians are basically getting bombarded. The Russians are just bombing the living shit out of them. And according to the Russians, they intercepted the communications between some of the troops here and their commanders. And the troops here are getting bombarded, and they desperately want to get out of this situation. And this says this area, I mean, this entire bridgehead depends on river crossings, and the Russians can easily destroy any pontoon bridges the Ukrainians build, as long as the Ukrainians can keep building them, but as long as the Russians keep destroying them, I mean, right, and at the same time bombarding the Ukrainian troops inside the bridgehead, then I mean, there's not much they can do, right? Right, and the deeper they go, the more artillery and the more air support they're going to come across, right? Because Russian jets will have an easier time in their own territory than if they have to go deep into Ukrainian territory where there's air defenses, right? So that's that. That's a precarious situation, and the Ukrainians again are bombing the same bridges, and today they're claiming that they've bombed. They were able to bomb. They're saying that they destroyed. They're saying they destroyed 7 command points, 13 gatherings of Russian forces, hits at radar and communication stations, bridges, pontoons, 3 ammunition depots, and fuel depots. But so far we haven't seen any evidence of that. And that statement, you know what's funny about that statement? It sounds a lot like the statement the Russians put out. It sounds like a Russian statement, but the Ukrainians are putting out that statement. 7 command posts. That's quite a bit. And bridges, pontoons, okay. 3 ammunition and fuel depots. So 3 ammunition depots and 3 fuel depots, or 3 ammunition and fuse. So they had ammunition and fuel in the same place. I don't know. But we haven't seen any pictures or videos of that, and usually they come out right away. The Ukrainians love to show that off, but they just made a statement this time. We didn't see anything, which is kind of suspicious, but yeah, that's basically it for today. Again, the most exciting news is north of Izium, right? At Balakliya. Yeah, and you know what? Yeah, this map is just updated, and it just shows that the Ukrainians have basically taken all of this chunk of territory. Wait, just one sec. Let me see here. Yeah. Yeah, so they went right here. The other force just wait 1 second here, guys. What? Okay, where is that town? Oh, this Ivanivka. The other one came from Ivanivka, and they went down. Right, so basically, yeah, the Russians. I'm gonna try to visually show you this. It's kind of difficult, but yeah, the Russians have taken. The Russians had control over Verbivka. Oh shoot. Okay. They had control over Verbivka and they've lost that control, and now yeah, I think the Russians had something along the lines of that. Okay. So this is very rough, but the Russians have basically, if the Ukrainians are able to consolidate their gains, the Russians will have lost this chunk of territory right here, with all these hamlets right here. I think this is wrong because Ivanivka, I think the Ukrainians controlled, but roughly, yeah. This Rybar map shows it better, right? So you can see what they did, right? Anyways, that's it for today. But I just, for those who want to listen, I just wanted to mention a few things. So basically, the Ukrainians have fulfilled 3 goals in the last 7 days since the Kherson counteroffensive began. They have forced the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant to shut down. So the Russians have essentially their goal was they wanted to cut off the electricity to the Ukrainian controlled areas and just connect that nuclear power plant, which is the biggest in Europe, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, to their own electrical power grid. And the Ukrainians, they had this mentality like, if we can't have it, you can't have it either. So the Ukrainians bombarded the nuclear power plant, and they tried to seize it twice, lost 400 troops. There's videos of Ukrainian soldiers washing up on the shores of Enhodar. But so they failed in that regard to seize the nuclear power plant, but it has been shut down, which is somewhat of a victory. Now, one of the reasons the Ukrainians launched this counteroffensive was because tomorrow on the 8th, they basically there's a meeting with all of the countries that support Ukraine, and they're going to decide if they're going to continue supporting Ukraine, how much more money they're going to put into it. And look, in terms of how much money they've invested in Ukraine, the US and the EU, especially the EU, if you consider the facts that Chancellor Scholz has said that without Russian gas, that Germany would go into recession, and now Russian gas has been cut off. So, and winter's coming. So for the Europeans, from an economic standpoint, this is very costly. And from a military standpoint, this counteroffensive, I think it's too early to really tell, but today I have to say, by doing what they did at Izium, the Ukrainians actually, they kind of struck gold, because up till now, the biggest achievement had been at Visokopilia, right? The village of Visokopilia. And then over at David Breed, they're just stuck, right? And then, Ozern is a PR stunt, like I said. So, even though these these settlements by themselves are nothing special, but and we don't know if they're going to be able to, again, we don't know if the Ukrainians are going to be able to consolidate their gains here, but either way, just to be able to do this, it still shows, at the end of the day, they're showing that they're willing to fight, and that might convince a lot of the countries that are sending them weapons to continue to do so. So that's definitely a win for them too. And if the defense contractors have anything to say about it, this war will go on for sure. Another win for the Ukrainians is that they delayed the referendums in the Zaporizhia region because of security issues. Those referendums have now been delayed. The plan was to incorporate the Zaporizhia region into Russia, and that would give Putin the political excuse he needed to basically to to mobilize, or semi-mobilize at least, out of the 2 million reserves, at least mobilize 500,000 or 1 million and send them in, because then he could say that, hey, the Ukrainians are not attacking Russians in Ukraine or separatists in Ukraine or independent states or whatever. They're attacking Russia. They're attacking us, so we have to mobilize, right? But now they've delayed the referendums. I mean, if they really wanted to, they could hold them. But I think Ukraine has already bombed some of the poll stations, so it's an issue of people, getting killed, people getting hurt, which wouldn't look good for the Russians. And they're supposed to be, defending these people, and that would be somewhat reckless to hold those referendums when they're not in complete control of the security situation, when it's unstable. Well, I mean, they have some options. They could, they could do it by mail. They could do it by internet. They could just hold a surprise referendum one Sunday. They could just, pop out and say, hey, we're having a referendum today, and then, just do it. But, yeah, they could do it by mail and internet. I don't know. That remains to be seen what's going to happen, but the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, forcing Russia to shut it down, is a victory for Ukraine. Ukraine showing that they have the will to fight is a victory for them, despite the casualties that that have been inflicted on them this week. Because according to the Russians, just on the Kherson front, Ukraine has lost 3,000 troops. They lost something like 400 trying to storm the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. And that's obvious. There's a lot of evidence of that. The barge is on fire and the bodies washing up. I mean, yeah, there's no denying that. So, I mean, in 1 week to lose that many, have that many men killed, you add up the power plant, you add up the numbers from Kherson region, and then I don't know, all the other regions, you add another 500 easy in 7 days, and 4,000 killed in action in 1 week. I mean, that would mean 16,000 casualties. So I don't know, it doesn't seem sustainable, but I mean, if the Ukrainians are determined to fight on, they, that's what they're gonna do. But I don't know how sustainable it is from the standpoint of how much it's costing. Because the countries that are supporting Ukraine have invested tens of billions. I think the amount they've invested is more than the defense budget of Russia, which is like 60 billion. And then now Germany's going to go into recession perhaps for a few years. So, I mean, if you add all that up, I mean, from a financial standpoint, if you look at the casualties from that kind of standpoint, it's not really worth it. But, this is a lot bigger than that. Defense contractors are making money, and the U.S. They want to weaken Russia for sure, and so yeah, the war will most certainly it will go on, and before I go, one thing I should mention: we're hearing rumors about Russia buying some artillery shells and rockets from North Korea. But you know what? They are using up 50,000 shells a day. Now, the war has certainly gone on longer than they expected, and they're saying they're buying 1 million or more shells from North Korea. You know what? I'll believe that when I see it, because the U.S. has not doubled but tripled and then quadrupled down. The White House and Pentagon have been yapping about Iranian drones are coming. They've bought hundreds of Iranian drones. They've trained, blah 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 blah. But have we seen any Iranian drones in Ukraine? No. So I'll believe it when I see it. I mean, it sounds convincing, but when I see the North Korean shells in Ukraine, when I see Iranian drones in Ukraine, which might actually impact the war significantly if they've bought hundreds of those of those drones, but I'll believe it when I see it. Aside from that, I'm going to wrap it up. That's it for today, guys. For those of you who have listened until the end, thank you for listening, and have a great day. Thank you, and I will see you in the next one.